Welcome to the Disciples of the Watch podcast.
Disciples, thank you for joining me for volume number 21 of the My Life in 4 Songs special on the Disciples of the Watch podcast. On this episode, as you probably already know if you read the name of the episode, it is Joshua Toomey, who is not only from the Talk Toomey podcast, but he also does audio autopsy on notfest.com. I'll have links in the show notes for both of those things so you can check them out and connect with Josh, or you can obviously find him in your podcasting app, at least find his podcast on the podcasting app. We get a little into that. You'll hear a little bit more about it as we get into the episode, of course. But always refer back to the show notes if you can't find anything. Plus, in your notes section in your podcasting app, you will also find all that kind of good stuff. I had a great hang with Mr. Toomey here on the show. We got into a few different things, and if there's a few things I want to make mention of before we get into the meat of the episode here. And one of the first things I did, what I tried to do when I was editing, is I make reference to his interview with Phil. And I think anytime you hear somebody with that amount of prestige, with that much maybe effect in your life, saying your name, I think it kind of has a special sound to it. And every time I would hear, every time I think of Joshua, or, I see him posting, that kind of pops in my head, Phil saying his name. So whenever I think of Joshua, I get this Joshua. And I can't even do that. I shouldn't even try. I tried in the episode. My apologies on that as well. But that's what pops into my head. And I went to go find the audio clip so I could share it with you so you could understand what I'm saying, even though you probably don't need to. And I still did it. I couldn't find it. So I let you down and I apologize. I get the same kind of feeling when I speak with Baco from the Cobras and Fire podcast when he interviewed Rob Halford, and Rob saying his name, it just kind of sticks in my brain every time I think of those people, those voices pop into my head. It's stupid and strange, I know, but just wanted to kind of throw out that explanation and an apology because I could not find the sound clip that I was looking for. And admittedly, though, I didn't spend a whole lot of time on it. I did a couple of searches and clicked on some audio files and stuff, and I kept getting not found. And eventually I decided, you know what? I got to get the episode done and edited, so I just have to give up and give an explanation. So there you go. That is the explanation. But anyhow, back to the guest of honor here, Mr. Joshua Toomey. A couple things I want to point out is, kind of pique your interest here. His getting to tell Alice Cooper that he is partially responsible for Josh even being on the planet. So there you go. Stay tuned for that little bit of information. And one thing that really caught me was Josh making a comment regarding getting himself to bed and then getting himself up for school. And man, in that moment, it hit me like a ton of bricks, and I really had to stop myself from like gushing and sharing my experience with him. That was similar, but not the same. His was, and he just stepped up. He was part of his team with his dad. Like, dad's out there working and I need to do this. Where mine was, my mom was at the bar and I just had to get myself to bed. Now, unfortunately, I wasn't so great about getting myself up for school. So I missed a little bit of time in elementary school because of that being a problem. I also was a deep sleeper. So there'd be times where the bus driving by my house would wake me up. And part of the reason for me getting myself up for school is because my mom, she would have to get early and get to the bus stop so she could catch a bus into Minneapolis for work. And that made me responsible for myself. Now, we didn't tackle it like a team, like, hey, I'm going to get you an alarm clock and we're going to work this out and let's do this together. No, my mom just basically, when she got a call from the school, was pissed off because I wasn't getting my ass to the bus stop every single day, all the time. So when Josh was talking about that, this memory came flooding back out of nowhere. And I just kind of had to just let it hit me and wash over me because I really wanted to focus on what Josh was saying. But I just felt like I had to share that with Josh. If you're listening, I had to share that with the listeners too. That is like, it felt kind of cool that it was like, here's somebody else from a single parent home that had similar, but not the same situation. And just boom, it kind of really connected with me personally. And the last thing I want to share regarding this as a teaser is Josh and I are simpatico on our feelings regarding car trips and the windows being up or down. I am right there with you, Josh. I don't like it. I'd rather the windows up and I can enjoy the nice peace and quiet without the wind blowing everything around. I'm the same way. So real quick before we get to Josh, if you'd be so kind, head over to Patreon, sign up, even if it's just for a free account. You don't always get everything with the free accounts, but for as little as $1, you can get early access, and higher tiers, you can get bonus episodes and all that kind of good stuff. So we're going to be building on that, but we're looking for more bodies. We're looking for more subscribers, more supporters, if you will. And of course, Josh has got us, he's up there as well. So while you're signing up for ours, sign up for Toomey's, and two birds, one stone. There you go. Win-win. And for all that information on our end, head over to dotwpod.com. That's DOTW, Disciples of the Watch. Pod is in podcast, dotwpod.com. And click on the support us link, and there you go. You can buy shirts and all that kind of good stuff from that link as well. And but like I said, we're looking to build up our Patreon site, so we'd love to see you there. And without further ado, let's get to the man of the hour, Mr. Joshua Toomey, on My Life in 4 Songs.
Excellent!
All right, My Life in 4 Songs. I'm hanging with Josh. Or do you prefer Josh or Joshua Toomey?
I guess Joshua is where we go by.
Yeah, I know you're referred to both. And God, was it Phil Anselmo? The way he said Joshua. Am I thinking of that correctly?
I believe Phil Anselmo did call me Joshua, so yes. So I guess if Phil Anselmo says it, then I guess it's true.
That's what we go with. Yeah, it's in my brain. I thought I remember hearing with that deep voice, Joshua. Of course, I can't fucking do it, but you get the idea. Just superimpose my voice with Phil's voice, and there you go. That's there it is.
Yeah, and I think, over years, he's now Philip H. Anselmo. So not Phil, he's Philip H. Anselmo.
Thank you for the clarification there. I don't want to get in any trouble here.
Right.
So yeah, Talk To Me podcast. You've been podcasting for a while, and I know you've had a few different iterations of your podcast, but it's pretty much just back to Josh Toomey, right? Or are you still doing the new pod on occasion?
New pod is done.
Okay.
Talk To Me has been actually be 9 years, I think, this month.
Yeah, congratulations.
And then it's basically a new show on MLiFS. We just rolled out the first episode called Audio Audacity, and it's something I've done over the years, but it just now is getting a show to itself. Where, I mean, it's not a new format, but, go talk to a member of a band, deep dive into an album, classic album of the band, and go track by track and just, what was the song about? How did you write this riff? All that good stuff. And makes for fun podcasting.
Oh, nice. How long have you been doing that? I don't even recall if I've heard, or is that
first episode came out 2 weeks ago. So.
Okay, there we go.
But over the years, I've done them on Talk To Me, and we actually did them on New Pod. That's kind of where the idea came from to make it its own show. But it's it's all in person stuff. So we go and sit down with the band, and the first episode was with Levi from Miss May I drove up to Cincinnati, sat down at his house and did the interview at his house. So it came out pretty cool.
Nice. That sounds pretty sweet. Better than having to do it through video, other than the travel.
Right.
Were you heading that direction anyway, or did they just tell you to get in your car and head up there?
Cincinnati's like an hour and a half from my house.
Okay. Well, that ain't too bad then.
So, yeah, it's not too bad. I think it read about an hour and a half, 2 hours. But yeah, it's not bad at all. That's the one thing about living in the Midwest is where, like, especially here, is pretty much 2 to 3 hours in every direction is another major city. So you can always find something to do.
Yeah, plenty of talent down that area too.
There you go.
Which is very helpful. So you're not going to be going to Hawaii to interview Alice Cooper or anything like that?
I mean, if Alice Cooper would have me, I will go to Hawaii to interview Alice Cooper.
You'd probably catch him in Arizona before you would Hawaii, though, I guess.
Yeah, sounds about right. But yeah, I will say it has been very confusing, and I have made a few posts and I made a few videos about it and whatnot, about how I'm like, all right, I'm sorry, because for a second, I was doing Joshua Toomey interviews, and I was just kind of basically getting everything together. So Talk To Me is now back to, like, kind of reverted back to my own show, and then Audio Audacity is through MLiFS. So basically, I can do like the Zoom interviews and just basically a straight up interview is probably going to be on Talk To Me. Anything else is going to be Audio Audacity through MLiFS.
Nice. Yeah, because I was scanning this site. I was on MLiFS, digging around a little bit, looking for you, and I noticed that the MLiFS type stuff was off of your imagery. So that's why I was kind of curious between the Talk To Me and what the situation was.
Yeah,
there.
It's a mess. It's very confusing, and I do understand that.
Well, but going forward, at least once it starts building up and word gets out, then there you go.
It would be like your podcast, like this was a separate show from Disciples of the Watch. This is a separate show from, 5 things about the worst years or any of those episodes that you guys do. They would all have their own feed or whatnot. And the even more confusing thing is all of this stuff is on the same podcast feed. Just the video for Audio Audacity is going to be on NotFest, and the video for Talk Toomey is going to be on the Talk Toomey YouTube channel. But episode-wise, it'll all be on the same podcast feed. So even more confusion.
Lots of layers there. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. If you want to find me, it's basically smoke signals and secret passwords at this point. It's like trying to find a rave in the 90s,
Oh, perfect. That'll be good for viewership, making it difficult.
Right, yeah. Basically, I want to make it as hard as possible for anyone to find shows that I do. That's
how the successful podcasters find their way. That's how Joe Rogan got started. He made it impossible to hear him. And look at him now.
Yeah, you had to have a secret link on the dark web to watch his show. So
exactly. Oh, well, at least it's out there. And obviously, it shouldn't be hard for people to do a quick Google search and find what they need to find. And of course, I'll put stuff here in the show notes as well so we can get everything linked up for people who want to dig a little deeper into Talk Toomey and Joshua Toomey's world.
There we go.
Well, shoot, that felt like a cool transition right there. Let's get deeper into your world there, Mr. Toomey.
Yeah, man, let's do it.
I want to know your life in 4 songs. I want to get a little bit deeper into your world, a little discovery into how did we get to here? How did Josh Toomey or Joshua Toomey, maybe a young Josh Toomey, get to where he became Joshua Toomey, talking to Phil Anselmo and such? Where do we kick off? Let's start there. You're a young lad. Put us in our place. Where are we at in the United States? If we are in the United States, I guess I shouldn't assume.
I was born in Owensboro, Kentucky, 3rd largest city in Kentucky. And my dad, I grew up, basically with my dad, but he loved music, always had music playing in the house, was still to this day loves buying records, loves buying cassettes, he's a physical product guy if you've ever met one in your life. Like he has an insane record collection, has an insane DVD collection, has an insane CD collection, and will pay top dollar at this point. It's getting a little out of hand. But we grew up kind of out in the country. He would play his records at full blast, listening to like Elton John and Led Zeppelin and Steppenwolf and Peter Frampton Comes Alive and White Snake, all that stuff. I just remember, like, I grew up listening to a lot of like hard rock around the house. Very musical family. My grandmother played piano, but she didn't play just like church piano. She played like ragtime, crazy piano. She was kind of a rocker at the time, and she had a love for music. Loved all the kids and the grandkids that played music. It was just always around at that house. Out with my grandparents' house and my dad's house. And then I guess the main kind of sticking point was I had some older cousins. I'm an only child, but my cousins, I grew up around them, and they they were huge into Kiss and Motley Crue and Poison. This is all 86, 87, 88. I'm like 8, 9, 10 years old, very formative years of music. But that'll kind of take me to my first track. And I will warn everybody that I am picking a lot of singles, but the singles are the ones that kind of got me, in the door with a lot of this stuff. And it's a pretty basic track, man. But my cousin had a vinyl of Kiss Double Platinum. I remember sitting upstairs with the record player, and we dropped the needle on Rock and Roll All Night, and it played through, and I took the needle back and played it through and took it back. I'm probably 8, 9, something like that. And it just was the first time that I really heard guitars and just drums and everything, and the hook. And I was like, I too want to rock and roll all night and party every day now that I'm, I'm almost double digits. I need to start doing that type stuff. So I got really big into Kiss. Baco actually laughed at this one time. He's like, I never knew you were into Kiss. I was like, dude, when I was like little, Kiss was it. And this was 88. So, I mean, they're way out of the makeup at this point. But I got into the makeup Kiss. One of the first records that I ever bought for myself was the Gene Simmons solo album, just because of how cool the cover looked.
Yes.
You know, as a kid, and then, you know, painted my face up all the time, you know, running around the house, just acting like Kiss, man. And it was definitely what, you know, got me listening to a little bit more, you know, rock and roll music, like, you know, music with guitars, and I fell in love with Kiss, man. Was
your dad a fan of Kiss, or how did he react to your fandom of such a band?
I think he was always good with Kiss. I don't think he was never like, that's one thing I will say, like my parents and my grandparents were never like, you can't listen to this, or this is the devil's music. Even though like my grandmother on my mom's side of the family is Sunday school teacher and like is heavily into the, you know, Baptist church, but she never once turned a nose to anything that I've ever done. I even remember playing her like demos of songs that I had in high school that had cuss words in them, and I'm like, you know, she's like, oh, that's nice, you know, but she was never preachy or you're going to hell for this or anything like that. So I will say that pretty supportive family all around when it came to love of music. But, you know, with him, yeah, I honestly think he was probably into the fact that I was so into music and so into a band, and just really kind of fell in love with the whole thing. And then yeah, he was always super, super supportive of you know, listening to music with each other.
It seems like that's usually the best way when people get into music is, well, I guess at times where there's that division where it's the stuff your family doesn't want you to listen to it, and it just makes that music more important to you because that's your outlet or your connection. But then there's times where it's the family's just right there with you. Either they're sometimes accepting of it and sometimes just tolerating. That's the word I was searching for. Yeah. Tolerating your enjoyment of it, because I'm sure they may have run through the same gamut when they were in there. You with the Elvis Presley's coming out and shaking his hips, and, you know, everybody in society screaming, that's the devil and you can't be doing that. And some families are, you know, a little more tolerant and a little more like, hey, it's a good outlet for their entertainment. So don't poo-poo it, because I think in times you're just going to drive a wedge.
Right. Yeah, it's funny. I met Alice Cooper one time, and I told him, I walked up to him and I was like, hey, I just want to thank you, because if it wasn't for you, I might not be here. And he was like, what do you mean? And I said, well, my parents told my mom's mom that they were going to go to an Alice Cooper concert, but really they ran off and eloped. Like, which is crazy to tell them that they were going to an Alice Cooper concert was probably better than that they were going to run off and get married. But so he goes, oh, like you're for real. Like, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't be here. And I'm like, oh yeah. He started laughing, and he said that he was going to talk about it on his radio show. I mean, that was 2007 or 8 when I told him that. So I would love to go through the archives of the Alice Cooper, whatever his syndicated radio show was, and try to find him talking about that, if he actually truly told that story on his radio show like he said he was going to.
Were you too busy to look it up at the time, or did they not have the archive set up?
I mean, that was like, what, 07? So, I mean, I don't know how, you know, I mean, podcasting and things like that were around, but it wasn't like
not like it today.
Super easy, convenient thing to find. I mean, I guess I could try it now. It'd probably be a lot easier, but, you know, trying to find a syndicated radio show that's not in your market in 2007, 8 is probably not not the easiest thing to do at the time.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I would have been wondering myself and trying to see if I could dig into those archives or get a replay the next day, or however. I don't know how they were doing it back then. That's a good point. Yeah, that was still pretty much in its infancy. And I mean, they were still trying to battle MP3s back then, weren't they? The record labels, or were they starting to accept digital streaming and such? I don't even remember. I've been through it, but I don't really remember that whole timeline.
Yeah, I'm trying to I remember like the first time I ever an actual torrent, like I used like a torrent site and like downloaded a band's entire discography in like one click. And that's when I'm like, oh, this is bad. Because even back in the early days of downloading with Napster and whatnot, it was still a tedious process. It was, you know, a lot of times you would start the download, you would go to work and you would come home and you would hope that whoever the peer-to-peer sharing didn't log off and all this other nonsense. So, I mean, it was still a pain.
Yes.
A friend of mine, Troy, had a T1 connection in like 1999 or 2000, and a song would load in like 2 hours, and we're like, this is crazy, you know. And now if anything takes more than like 5 seconds, I'm like, what's going on? Is my computer about to crash? But yeah, it's crazy how far all of that stuff has come, and at one point how hard it was to find things, how to you know, the whole going to the record store because you wanted to hear a new band, all that stuff like that. At one point, you truly had to read an article about a band and man, I would love to hear this band one day. And hopefully you remember that band's name. And then you go to the record store and then you see that band and then you put two and two together and you buy the album or whatnot. And now it's like, hey, Gene, have you heard this new song from blah, blah, blah? No. Hang on one second. Boop. It's on your phone and you're listening. You're like, hey, it sounds pretty cool. Like it's crazy how all this stuff is, as how far everything has come, I guess.
Yeah. I was almost tempted to use the word evolution, but I think in some instances people think it was not quite an evolution, just maybe a change that maybe isn't always accepted. I know some bands would prefer to go back to the old days and where you had to buy a CD or a record and live with that until you burned it out or lost it or your girlfriend broke up and took it with her and then you had to go buy it again. Right. You can't do that with digital media unless, for streaming purposes, they cancel your Spotify account, then boo-hoo, you can always sign up with your own and your music right back in place. But somebody takes your CD collection or you leave that CD booklet on the top of your car and then you drive off and the next morning you realize, I was at that party and now I don't have.
Yeah, that sounds like a true story. Did that happen to you, Gene?
No, it did not. But I've talked to people who've had those things disappear, and that ruins your life, man. That's a lot of CDs you could fit into some of those booklets, and then to lose a big chunk of your collection like that, because that's your prime stuff. You're not putting the garbage in there. You're not putting your Carpenter's greatest hits in there. You got your road CDs, man. You're getting on the road. You want to hear some Pantera and something. And then next thing you know, you don't have your Pantera collection anymore because it's sitting in the ditch somewhere and you don't know where.
Yeah, I'll say too, it blows my mind when I don't know if you're like this or not, but it blows my mind when I see people that, I bought this CD on the day of release and I still own it. Like that to me is wild because during those years, I think it's because I worked at a used record store, but if I ever needed money, like the CD collection was the first thing to like walking into the used record store with a giant stack of CDs and hoping you get enough money for the night out or the electricity bill or whatever you needed, man. So when people to this day still have like, I bought this album or this actual copy of this album on release day in 1995. I'm like, I'm just never really good with CDs either. Like with CD booklets and things like that. Those things ate CDs alive to me. And then I would, they'd fall between the seat or, you shove 2 or 3 into the same sleeve. Like I just never took care of my CDs enough to still have, a collection.
Well, my collection was pretty limited just for financial reasons for a good portion of my life. So I never did luckily have to sell much. It was more, I remember selling George Thorogood live so I could get Jimmy Page Outrider at a record store. So I brought in that. They gave me whatever $4 or whatever the hell it was worth at the time. And then I immediately put that into Jimmy Page Outrider, and I still have that on vinyl in my collection. But my vinyl collection back then was also very small. Actually, speaking of Kiss, I had a Kiss collection that I started, but it was kind of random bits. I wasn't like going, okay, I'm going to get the first one, then I'm going to the second one. It was like, got my hands on this, and then I got my hands on double platinum, and that's one that really sticks out of my mind because it had two slabs of vinyl in there and so many songs. That for me was like more bang for my buck. And then eventually I got in with Jehovah's Witnesses and gave them all away because that's the devil. Even though I kept my Zeppelin and I kept all the other stuff, it was the Kiss albums that they convinced me to get rid of. And to this day, I'm still pissed off about it every time it comes up. It actually came up at work today where my coworker sharing his love of Kiss and his first Kiss album. And it was like, yeah, I used to have a double platinum. Baco actually gave me a replacement copy out of the kindness of his heart.
Good for him.
He had an extra copy. And
what a nice guy.
He is a nice guy. But we probably shouldn't say that on the internet. People are going to start to get the right idea.
You can delete that.
Party's
if we're kind of going along the timeline of me of this, what this episode's about, I guess, is, Kiss kind of got me into music. I really wanted to. I was actually looking at I didn't know what it was at the time, but it was a Les Paul copy, I'm assuming, at a pawn shop, and they wanted like $75 for it or whatever. And I actually put it on layaway. I remember putting like $20 down, and I think I'm 10 at the time. And then that's when we moved to Nashville. Like, I put the money down on the guitar, and boom, like, we're relocating. So like that pawn shop just got a free $20, right? I wanted the Les Paul copy, obviously, because I wanted to be Ace Frehley at first. And then I moved to Nashville in like the 5th grade. And then, I mean, this is when it's just me and my dad. He's starting a new job. And like, we've talked about this recently about how crazy of a time that was, because he was making like no money, like barely scraping by, and enough to, so bad to where, like, if we went to a friend of his house, like, they would make us a few sandwiches to take home. And like, and he says there's like a point where I looked at him at like 10 or 11 and just like, Dad, I don't think we're going to make it, because it was, I mean, we were just eating like ramen, and we lived in a 1-bedroom apartment, and he worked 3rd shift at the time too, which is crazy to me. Which was also crazy to me, because he would go to work. I would put myself to sleep at like 11 years old, and then get up for school, get ready, and be on the bus before he even got home. So like, that's a lot of, looking back, I mean, that's a lot to put on, a kid in the 6th grade to get himself up and get himself ready for school, and to actually do it. Because it's funny, because my kids, I think they'd just be like, well, I guess we're sleeping in every day, but I knew that, he always asked me why I didn't get into more trouble. And I knew that that's the last thing our family unit needed, was to me getting in more trouble.
Yeah. You were being a team player.
Yeah. Right. But that was also where my, this is like, I think we moved to Nashville in 90. And then, so I'm still loving Kiss. I think I had like 2 Kiss shirts, and I, wear one on Monday, one on Tuesday, wear the other one on Wednesday, wear the, you know what I'm saying? And go back and forth. And that was basically middle school.
How was school for you then?
It was fine. I will say, and I do thank him for this. I mean, we did live in an affluent part of town, which I was like, why didn't we move to like a part of town that we could probably more afford? And he said, well, where he got the job, his car was such a piece of junk that he couldn't drive very far. So we really like broke this down like just recently. Like he came over and spent the night, or stayed for a few nights, and we just kind of went down memory lane. And he was like, yeah, there were nights where I would just start like, he would call his job and say, hey, I'm on my way, but my car broke down and I'm going to have to walk. And he said his like supervisor would come pick him up. He worked at a factory. His supervisor would just come find him, because this is the 90s. There's no cell phones. Would just come find him, pick him up, and drive him on to work. And then get a ride home. And it was, he had this Chevy Nova, and it's a cool car. Like, but his Chevy Nova was not cool. It was, he spray painted it black.
Oh, really?
First off, it had like these baby blue seats that were just torn to shit. Even like when you're a kid and you're like, hey, my mom will take us to the movies if your mom will pick us up, kind of stuff. I would never, I would just not go. Like, I can't go. If that's the deal, we can't go. Like I was so embarrassed of this car.
I don't blame you.
If he had to take me to a school dance or pick me up from school or anything, I'm just like, please just park this thing miles away. But looking back, I mean, it was the Chevy Nova, great car, not this one. But those nights at that apartment, just hanging out, the apartment did have a pool in it, so that was cool. It's had some kids in the complex that were, into music also, kind of made friends that way. And then that kind of leads me up to my second pick, which is Enter Sandman by Metallica. Because up to that point, I had maybe heard Injustice for All. I had like one older friend that was into like Warrant and Motley Crue and all that stuff, and he had played me Injustice for All, but it didn't really click. And then I saw the Enter Sandman video, and I was just like, oh shit, like this is awesome. Like that was my entry point into Metallica was the Black Album. And again, I'm I think I was 12 when this album came out. So I dove, as much as I was into Kiss, I was even more into Metallica. Like I dove headfirst in, and, every poster on the wall was a Metallica poster. That's the one thing, you get into Metallica on the Black Album, you got 4 albums of stuff to go back and listen to. You've got Garage Days, you've got Kloof 'Em All. They put out the year and a half in the life of Metallica.
Yes.
Like, I was so deep. So that's where getting into Cliff and getting into Jason, like I was like, I'm going to be a bass player.
Oh, really? That was the spark that got you into bass?
Yeah, I was like watching, Cliff and Jason really got me into wanting to be in a band. And I was at school one day and we were, the dudes, me and a couple of guys were sitting at a table, and, one kid's like, I'm going to be a guitar player. The next kid's, I'm going to be a guitar player. And maybe a little bit of intuition or figuring out how to get into a band or whatnot too. I was also like, hey, I'll be a bass player, and I'll get in that way. And yeah, so I saved up. I got some money for Christmas. I got $5 a week allowance, and I got $6 a week for school lunch. And I didn't eat school lunch for God knows how long. I saved up my $5 or whatever, and we went to a music store right outside Nashville. I grew up in Hendersonville, which is, the home of Johnny Cash and Taylor Swift and all these people. But so we go to this music store in town. I found a bass that was it was a Memphis P bass copy, and it was just in my price range. It was like $135 or something.
What did it look like? Did it look
P-bass.
like paint wise, was it set up to be like cool, or was it like one of those seafoam green models because it was cheaper?
No, it was I think it's actually, I was like, is it here? No, I think it's at my dad's house. But it was just a natural wood with it looked like something from the 70s. I mean, it wasn't, it was a hunk of junk, but I bought it, and then the next thing was going to be, how am I going to get an amp? And my dad actually out of nowhere just goes, well, you saved up for this, I'll chip in and buy you an amp. And I got me a little, it was a Crate BX10 or something like that. I mean, it was a little 10 watt bass amp, and I got that home and got some tab books, and basically I spent, the next 6 months trying to figure out how to play Creeping Death and For Whom the Bell Tolls, and just down the line of all of the Metallica catalog at that point.
Since you started at the Black Album, how did you initially take to the previous releases? Because if you're working your way time-wise, it seems like it's getting a little bit heavier, a little bit thrashier as you're working your way backwards through the 80s. Or how did you kind of go through that path with Metallica?
I don't think I ever really saw a whole bunch of change, like a whole bunch of difference in the style. Like now I can see like, all right, this is probably a little bit more commercial, a little bit more polished. But at the time, it was just all Metallica. It was just all one big pile of Metallica. Like I think even in my Kiss fandom, like I didn't really differentiate too much between Crazy Nights and Destroyer. It was all Kiss to me at the time. So it just, maybe just different eras of the band. But I don't think I ever really put it on and just was like, ooh, what is this? It was like, okay, I guess maybe Kill 'Em All is a little bit out of left field. But once you dive into all, like where I got to at one point, I mean, it was just like there was nothing else. It was just all Metallica at the time.
Yeah, it's almost ingrained in your DNA if it hits you that hard, it seems, to where you go back in that catalog. Because I did the same thing like with a band like Death. It, hearing it throughout the years never clicked, and all of a sudden one day, one of the last 2 albums, and I don't remember which, I think it was the last album, it just all of a sudden hit me like a freight train, and then I worked my way back through everything. But yeah, those earlier ones are a little bit more difficult for me than that later period. And I know some people, that was Metallica's jumping point, and they don't really care to go backwards. They just were on the train from the Black Album moving forward. And didn't gel much with the 80s output.
Yeah, it's funny how many younger bands have come on the podcast over the years, and like I got into Metallica on Reload, or I got into Metallica. Saint Anger was my entryway. Like I want to know like those people, like how those people see the Metallica catalog. If Saint Anger is what you came in on, like what do you think about Ride the Lightning?
Like gross me out the door.
I guess if you walk into Metallica on Saint Anger and that's your entry point, I mean, I guess everything is up from there, but
yeah,
it's definitely would be a weird place to start. But I also think the Black, see, to me, the Black Album is kind of where I stop also. Like, I do like the last couple of albums, don't get me wrong, but there was a big, like, between me getting into the Black Album and then everything else that I got into, and then Load coming out, like, I was so disappointed in Load. Like, yeah, for being such a fan.
Yeah.
I was already almost over it by the time Load came out.
So you were one of us.
Right. I came in hard, and then I was already mad by the time Load came out.
That's awesome. I gave Load a chance, but it was like, nope, Metallica's on a different path, and I can't follow them on this one. It just didn't click. And I'll revisit them at times, but just it doesn't hit like everything from Black Album before by any stretch.
Yeah, it's definitely a different place. And then I mean that kind of comes into my further selections. But I mean, you got to think too. I mean, Metallica is kind of the gateway to like really getting into Megadeth and Slayer, and even even went down like a death metal path with like Obituary and Cannibal Corpse and Deicide and all that stuff. Like I kept getting heavier and heavier and heavier, and then I guess I'll dive right into my next pick, which is Korn's Blind. That's 94, 15, freshman in high school. Like a lot's changed. 91, still in I guess 91's elementary school. And then, by 94, I'm in high school. I see a photo of Head in Metal Maniacs magazine, and they were playing Foundations Forum, I think 94, I guess. And it's that whole thing. It's like, you see a picture of the guy in the magazine. All right, we had a punk rock band, and it was kind of a joke band, but we had called it Crack Baby. And I don't think I've ever said that name on a podcast in like 9 years. Crack Baby, but it was spelled Krac backwards KBABY. Like that was 1993. Like that was 93 into 94. Like we had not heard of Korn. So I see the name Korn, and I'm like, what the hell? Like, and we even like, if you find, I'll even find the Crack Baby logo, but it's almost the Korn logo. It's wild how similar it is. So I see the picture. I'm like, something's cool about about this whole thing. And I had a friend of mine named Doug, and he had what did he have? It was like a Trans Am or a Firebird or something, like just an older muscle car.
Dang. You ever take it off any sweet jumps?
His was cool. Not like my dad's Nova. But Doug drove like a maniac, like everywhere we went, no matter what it was. Like we were jumping the train tracks. We were driving too fast. He always took the T-tops off. And to this day, I don't like the windows rolled down on my car because the wind is just like, blah, my hair is everywhere. And like, I've never liked the whole wind in my face thing when it comes to a car. And Doug was like the absolute worst with like, we're going somewhere, taking the T-tops off, windows down. It was awful. But we drove from Hendersonville to Bowling Green, Kentucky, which is about an hour north of Nashville. And that's just like, hey, what are we doing today? I don't know. Let's go for a drive. So we go to the mall in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and they had a Blockbuster Music, and you could take any CD you wanted to them. They would open it up, put it in a CD player. You get some headphones, and you can listen to whatever you want to. So I see the first Korn album, like right when it comes out, and I'm like, oh, that's that band. So I want to hear it. So I have them put it on. I put the headphones on. I hear that ride cymbal, the build up, the Are You Ready? Like, I'm just like, this is fucking new. Like, this is completely new. This is awesome. I must have this album. So I bought it, got it home, dove into it, loved it. I started to, they came through in concert not too long after that. Small club. This is still before TRL. This is still before them blowing up at all. Like, they're still playing small clubs. This is also a time where a friend of mine, Jeremy, who has been on the podcast, he is now a tour bus driver, but he and I made it a point to meet every band that came through town. So the first concert I ever go to, which is all around 94, like 30 years ago, is a pivotal year. I go to my first concert, which was Cannibal Corpse, and we meet all of Cannibal Corpse. Chris Barnes at the time, the whole band. And I'm like, holy shit, like the guys on the stage are right there, kind of deal. So the next big show to come through town is Pantera. we're like, all right, we're going to go to the major hotels in the city, look for tour buses, stake them out. Like we were on a mission. And we go down and we find some tour buses outside the nice hotel in Nashville. We go in, and this was a time also where the Pantera home videos are out. So the crew guys also. You watch those, you learn, Big Val and all the guys. Like you know their faces too. So we walk into the hotel. We had been staking it out for hours, and we leave and we come back and we walk in, and Big Val is sitting in the lobby, and we're trying. I'm 15, and then Jeremy, I think it was 16 or 17, and we oh my God, it's Big Val, and we go up to him like, oh man, it's so awesome to meet you, and blah blah blah. I remember he was just like, hey guys, just be cool with the band, they'll be cool with you, all that stuff. And so we go to the bathroom, we come out. I go to the bathroom. My friend Jeremy runs out and he was like, Dimebag is at the checkout desk. And I'm like, pee probably flying everywhere or something. Yes. But, zip up, run out there. And yeah, Vinny and Dime were checking out at the front desk. And, you just see the big beard, the big pink beard at the checkout desk. And we run over and we get photos. And that's the other thing too, is my friend Jeremy always carried a camera, like just a little 35 millimeter camera.
Yeah, smart.
So anytime I post photos of me as a kid with anybody, it's because he took photos, because it's either a disposable camera or I couldn't afford a camera or whatnot, no cell phone cameras at the time. So I'm so thankful that through all these times he had a little shitty camera with him and took photos. But yeah, we met all the guys in Pantera that day. And then we go to the shows. So moving on to the first time I go to see Korn, I'm staking them out, trying to find out where the buses are, and they're at the small club. So you go to the buses and hang out, and I think I met them immediately after that, and they were my band through high school, and I was getting ready for this show. I was thinking about this, everything kind of coming to this point was Kiss had a 2-decade career. By the time I got into them, they had all this stuff to get into, and they were still kind of my cousin's band that I got into. And then Metallica, I get into them on their 5th record. There's an entire discography. There's already legions of fans. But like Korn was like the first band for me that was my band. I got into them, first album, right after it came out, and have seen them, I've seen them every time they've came through, probably at this point. Got to see them open for Ozzy, all that stuff, just kind of climbing the ladder. And then, years later, they're on TRL and all that nonsense. But for a good while, man, Korn was like the band that I was into. And like I said, man, it was like the first band that I got into, the first band that like really changed and kind of created an entire scene, that which got me into Deftones and Limp Bizkit and all that stuff too. So, I mean, that's kind of where my life kind of took that turn, and where I was listening to more of this style of music, but I never stopped listening to Metallica and, all the death metal stuff too and things like that. But it's just like, oh shit, like this is something different. This is something new. And this is something I can get into like on the ground floor.
pain. You don't know the chances. I'm so blind, another means I'll find escape to pain inside. You don't know the chances. What if I should die? The kind of pain. You don't know the chances. I'm so I could see I'm going blind. 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 I could see I'm going blind.
So you're getting into Metallica and also new metal, but they're in that bookend there. Grunge. Where did grunge sit with you?
It's funny, even when Baca was doing the grunge cast and all that stuff, I never really got into grunge. I think, I had Nevermind, I had 10, some of that stuff, but that was still kind of my formative years of like kind of getting into really buying my own cassettes and things like that. But I was never a giant grunge fan. Like I got into some punk, I like my Minor Threat and things like that. But yeah, grunge is something that I've never really glommed back to. And I think
you actually own some though, huh?
Yeah, but I mean, I think everybody owned Nirvana, Nevermind, and Pearl Jam 10 at the time.
For me, it was many years later.
I've never liked Alice in Chains. I've always found Lane Staley's voice annoying, and it's wild to say because people are like, oh my god, And I'm like, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I've grown to like them more over the years, where like I'll hear like Them Bones or something like that and kind of get into it. But there was also a time, and I think I talked to. Drop a name, but I've talked to Ricky Rackman about this. I was like, there was a time where like grunge would piss me off on the Headbangers Ball because they would play the grunge music all day long, and then Headbangers Ball comes on, and I'm like, all right, Countdown to the Ball's on. I can't wait. And they're like, what's the number one video? Oh, Blind Melon, No Rain. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I want to hear right now.
Yeah, no shit.
And so when the grunge would be played on Headbangers Ball, I would almost get annoyed with the whole genre. But but it's weird. I do have I was talking to someone the other day about this. I do have a very weird, like, I'll say I like a band, but that might mean I really love one record. Like there are some bands that I'm like, oh yeah, I really like the Toadies. But then I think about it, I'm like, I really just like Rubbernecking. Like I didn't really listen to anything after that. I don't really keep up with them, but man, that album's really good. Or there's a few bands like that I might say that I love, and then I really think about it. I'm like, you know what? I think I just really focused in on one record. But that's another thing too with the whole Metallica thing. 91 Black Album, and then like I said, I got into all the death metal and stuff, but But I was even at the time listening to, Judgment Night soundtrack's a big one that we always kind of go back to, or Faith No More.
Yes.
A lot of like there was a lot of precursor stuff into the first Korn album that it kind of all came together on, like with Sepultura and Chaos AD and all that stuff too. Like there's definitely a lot kind of going into the first Korn album. So I think listening to the first Korn album, it was like everything kind of fell into like one album, and then we went from there. So it was kind of building to that album also.
That's a good point.
So, you get into Korn and then Deftones, and then everything else is kind of coming out around the time. So when Load does come out, I'm already like into all this other stuff, and then Load comes out, it's kind of more of a hard rock record. I'm like, all right, I'm out. You guys have fun.
Well, yeah, especially with that whole boom of new metal and that being, like I said, ground zero, to use that term again for you. I could easily see how, then again, you never know when an album's going to grab you. There's always been surprises where it's like, oh yeah, everybody hates it, and you put it on and go, holy crap, this is good.
Right.
Obviously, you didn't have that experience. Regarding Metallica, when then did you start to kind of gravitate back to them? Would that be Death Magnetic?
Yeah, I mean, I will say that like every time that they've been around me, I went to see them live. It's not like I didn't like turn my back on them. I just never got into the new stuff. I still continued to listen, and still do continue to listen to the first 5, and then select stuff off the last couple of records and things like that. And actually, the one thing I go back to the most now is like Garage Inc. The Metallica is the greatest cover band of all time.
Yes,
that is one thing they can do is record a cover.
Yeah, and for that, Diamond Head thanks them very much. That's
right.
What keeps them going.
Yeah,
because all the money they get from Metallica's sales.
Well, yeah, if you look at any Diamond Head like festival set list, it's like half of the songs on the set list them because Metallica did them. But yeah, I mean, all those dudes, man. If you ever listen to Ryan J. Downey's Speak and Destroy, where he's found a lot of those dudes from like the Anti-Nowhere League and all those guys that Metallica has covered over the years. Like when Metallica did So What, the dude from the Anti-Nowhere League bought a house. Like he was working he was like roofing or something like that. Like, and then all of a sudden they did this cover and he bought a house. He can bring out a version of the Anti-Nowhere League and play shows because Metallica fans know the song So What. It's just
that's awesome.
They do have that touch, man. It's crazy. The whole time too is like I said, Kiss made me want to be in a band. Metallica made me want to play bass. By the time Korn comes out, I'm still playing bass. I'm still trying to be in a band, trying to find a band, trying to start a band, 16, 17 years old.
What was the issue with that? Was it finding dedicated people or just finding anybody?
Finding anybody wasn't too bad. I like my best friend still to this day, Eli McFadden. He played drums at the time, so him and I would just go and just play. Jesus, that's half the battle right there. You got a bass player, you got a drummer, and then we had a couple of guitar players over the time, and then somewhere in there, Korn's coming out. I'm playing bass. By my senior year of high school, I did the classic, walked into the music store. There was like band seeking bass player and influences, this, that, and the other thing. Yep. I take the little tab off. I call them. They're on the complete other side of Nashville, but I'm still gonna go audition. And like because Eli also played guitar, just incredible musician all around. And while I'm like at this audition, they're like, hey, we actually kind of need we're looking for a second guitar player too. So I get Eli into the band. And then the band that there was a local band called Adrenaline Hammer that I loved. Like they would record in Hendersonville. Everyone there's dad was in a band. Like, some guy played for the Oak Ridge Boys. Some guy, everybody played for somebody except for my dad. Like we lived on the poor side of town. But you would go to their house and they'd have these big houses with recording studios in them and whatnot. And so a friend of mine's dad had a 8-track recording studio and he would record bands. So a band from like a town over, Adrenaline Hammer, came and recorded like a 4-song EP or whatever, demo. And we got snowed in right after that. It was like a couple snow days. I know you live in Minnesota, so you don't know what a snow day is. But like anytime in Tennessee, you get any snow, you don't go to school that day.
Yeah, more of a problem.
But we, I basically got snowed in over at Jason's house for a few days. Jason Barnett. And then, so we're at his house. I listened to this demo over and over and over because they sounded a lot like Life of Agony to me. And it was another band I loved at the time. So then Jason gets into this band, Adrenaline Hammer, as like a second guitar player. So I'm like, shit, they're practicing at his house now. So I'm going to go watch them practice because I want to see this band. Dude, the singer walks in, drummer walks in, everybody walks in. They're like the coolest dudes to me. They're a couple of years older than me. I'm like 17. They're like 19, out of school. And they're rehearsing. And then one day, in one rehearsal, their bass player didn't show up. And they're like, we got to kick Tony out. And then they start doing the band meeting about how they're going to find a bass player. And I'm right there. I'm listening. And I'm like,
Yes.
and I'm like, actually, guys, I play bass, And they're like, all right, well, go learn a couple of our songs and next practice, you can audition. And I, learn them as best I could. And I go to practice. And like the first thing we play had like a bass intro. So I'm nervous as shit. And I probably was awful, but I somehow convinced them to get in the band. I got one, actually, they almost didn't have me in the band because I was still 17 and they wanted to play bars and stuff like that. So it's like there were a few places in town where I couldn't play. But the one place we did play a lot was an all ages venue that I was cool with playing. So yeah, they were worried about me still being in high school and still being underage to play this, play these clubs or whatnot. But I finally got in the band. That band goes on to change its name to 12 Volt Negative Earth, which is the kind of the band that I was known for in Nashville at the time. Kind of cool going back to that first show that I saw was Cannibal Corpse at this club called 328. Performance hall, held about 1,200 people. It's not there anymore. They tore it down to, build a new building like they do in Nashville. So that was in 94. And by 90, I think 8, we were headlining it. So like my first concert and my like first headlining the same venue at the same venue was like 4 years apart. Like it was wild. It's looking back at then, it just seemed like it was a normal progression.
Yes.
But now it's like,
you're in it.
That was like, that's actually kind of cool that shit happened. But
Definitely.
yeah, man, that band had a little bit of a following. Enjoying the band, we just kind of kept moving forward. That was where. So living in Hendersonville, Tennessee, I give a lot of kudos to my friend Mike Richards. He owned a used record store that was in between my house and the school. So I pretty much had to pass it every day. So I would stop in there and I would talk to him. And he was probably in his mid-20s, but I would go in there and we would just talk. I like talk music all for hours. And he was a big Kiss fan too. He told me about going to see Kiss on the Creatures tour where they didn't tell anybody that Ace wasn't in the band anymore. And he said he was really confused. Like, why is this guy on stage running around like a crazy person? And then at one point they just happened to go, oh yeah, this guy's name is Vinnie Vincent. And then they moved on to the rest of the show. Didn't really make an announcement or anything. So I mean, we would just talk about that type shit all day long. And one day I'll walk in and he goes, hey man, Fred Corey from Cinderella was just in here and he just moved to town and he's recording bands. He opened a studio in Hendersonville, Tennessee. And I'm doing the whole like, well, you should tell him about my band, kind of thing. So next time Fred goes in, Mike says, hey, there's this kid in town's got a band. I think they're really good. You should check them out. And so Fred gave him his number, gave it to me. I call Fred. We go over to Fred's studio. We play him the demo tape that we recorded at our friend Jason's house. Fred likes the band enough to where he has us come in. And the one thing about Fred, he never charged us anything to record. And it was like a massive studio. Like he was writing and recording country music and like he was actually doing legit business, but he also had this ragtag group of dudes coming in and recording demos and stuff.
Did he do that with anybody else? Do you know?
No, he did. He was kind of doing the whole, like, I think we signed some kind of production contract. Like if these demos lead to a record deal, then I get to produce the first album. We're like, okay, kind of thing. Okay. And he shopped it around a little bit, but that was still like I said, man, that was 90, 96, 97. So, I mean, that was, Cinderella wasn't the coolest thing yet, was at the time. And I always joke about that too, because the Moscow Music Peace Festival and all that stuff was like 5-6 years earlier. But by the time we met Fred in like 96, glam was such a hair metal, glam, whatever you're going to call it, was such a down spot that we almost like fucked with him about it. And we're like, like, oh yeah, that's what you guys used to do, but this is the new style. And, like all that stuff. And,
busting balls.
Yeah. We busted his balls all the time. But, he turned out to be like a really good mentor and someone that just kind of really like honed the band and kind of talked to us about doing certain things. I mean, I do wish that he could have like kind of pushed the band a little bit more. But the other thing too is after we did all these like amazing demos with him, Cinderella did go back out on tour in like 98-ish, you know, like I forget what it was called, but so they get back together and they go out on tour, and like while he's gone, we go and record like our debut CD or whatever, our local band CD, and it doesn't sound great. The songs are there or whatnot, but he gets back, he comes off the road, he hears the album, and he wants to do. He's like, man, I want to record the next thing. So we ended up doing like a full on EP with him in like 2000, and that, you know, that's actually pretty cool. But yeah, but over the years, he's always been great, especially with the podcast. Like even in the last, you know, however many ever years, he's been on the podcast a couple of times. It's even funny to me now, and just being friendly with him, and you know, him like liking posts. You know, it is weird. Like when any member of a band that has been on the podcast likes or comments on a post to me, it still like blows my mind. Like I'm still that 15-year-old kid that was chasing buses that, like, holy shit, man, that's the guy from Hatebreed, you know, like, and you know, like he'll make a joke on a post or something. But yeah, Fred was always great. You know, that band opened a lot of doors, opened for a lot of bands. You know, we got to open for the Michael Graves era Misfits, and we got to open for Limp Bizkit, and we got to open for, you know, just there's all the pretty much any big band that came through town. Like somehow we would weasel our way onto the bill. But then I think at one point that's when that band kind of ran its course, probably ran its course a couple times. And then in 2002 is when I left that band. And then I joined Primer 55 for like kind of their final run of that original era. And then, you know, I came back to them in like 2007 when like we reunited for a label had picked Primer up for a kind of like B-sides and rarities album or whatever. So I heard that was going on. So I reached out to like the main dude that was in the band, and I'm like, so are we like touring? And he goes, well, I guess you were the last bass player in the band, so I guess you're still the bass player. So yeah, we're going to do a tour. So I was like, all right, well, send me the dates, you know, kind of thing.
Why do you think that first band ended up folding? Was it its time, or was there issues that kept it from going forward before Primer?
I think I would say it probably just kind of ran. I mean, it was 6 years of like, just, you know, some success, no success. You know, I think we kind of peaked at one point. I think if we could have gotten picked up around 2000, that was probably like the time. But by like 2002, like we were just kind of sputtering along. I don't think there was any like, there weren't any like girlfriend issues or anything like that going on in the band. It was just kind of like and I mean, that kind of comes up to the next pick in the thing here too is, I mean, by 2002, I mean, times were changing, you know, like new metal was kind of running its course. And even though I think that we might have fit in more with the next phase of music with like the kind of the metalcore phase coming up, because I think we always kind of had that in us too. I think we were a little bit more metal than we were new metal, but I think it just kind of ran its course at that point. So so like even when I joined Primer, I mean, it was still kind of like, all right, this is cool, but it's not as cool as it once was, kind of thing.
Yeah, and regarding that, I do want to point people in a direction too with your last appearance on Cobras and Fire, and because you talk a little bit about that, your experience with Primer on that. So anybody who wants to get a little bit more than that, I'll definitely add that to the show notes, or just go digging through Cobras and Fire on. Obviously, you can search that anywhere, but it should be easy to find. Yeah, because that was one thing I was listening to that and hearing you talking about that and your experience in there, and then regarding, you know, the new bands and stuff and the issues that they're currently dealing with, and reflecting on your own experiences. Yeah. So a little more detail on that for anybody that's interested. And plus, you know, we're always supportive of our friends over there at Cobras of Fire as well.
Yeah, definitely run over there if you want to hear me talking about getting all the hazing and the and hating every single moment of my life at that point, but also looking back on it so fondly. But that will that will take us into my next track. There was a lot going on up until this point, you know, where I joined Primer, did the tour, listening to a lot of music around the time. But then we started hearing this stuff kind of coming out of New England, like the new wave of American heavy metal or whatever you want to call it. I remember Eli, kind of going back to my good friend, playing me, this is not my pick, but playing me Unearth's The Oncoming Storm. And like just the way that album starts out with like a crazy ripping guitar solo. And living through kind of the nu metal era where guitar solos weren't prominent at all.
Right.
I was like, holy shit, you know, like there's guitar work again. So that kind of goes into that. And he's like, hey, have you heard this band? Have you heard that band? Check out this band. And I go and see Killswitch Engage, and it blew my mind. I mean, that was another one that I was like, holy shit, this is awesome. So my final track of this is The End of Heartache by Killswitch Engage. This would be like 2004. We go see Killswitch Engage. It's like, I know I'm the nu metal guy, and everybody like talks about all my nu metal shows, and I had the new pod and whatnot, but I was still listening to this whole time, still listening to Megadeth, still listening to Hatebreed, still listening to, we got into a lot of the Earth Crisis and a lot of the Victory Records bands at the time. So there was always a plethora of music. It wasn't just new, it wasn't just one genre the whole time. I've never been a just one genre guy. But The End of Heartache comes out, and again, man, walking into that, double bass, shredding. Howard Jones's voice is amazing. Still one of my favorite singers of all time. And that one was an album that really shook up the palette. You know, it shook up music for me. And I think it's still one of the last regional music scenes. Because I mean, now with the internet and everything else, kind of throws everything off. But there were so many bands kind of coming from that area with Killswitch and Shadows Fall and what am I thinking of? Philabonte from All That Remains, and you know, all the bands that kind of came from those bands and before those bands. And there was just kind of a whole scene up there, man, with all those bands coming out. Killswitch was kind of leading the way, man. And I still say Killswitch is one of the most ripped off bands of all time. You know, just with the way that they go about the way that they do songwriting.
So how big are you into Shadows Fall then?
Oh, I don't like Shadows Fall.
Oh, really?
I'm just saying, I was just kind of. It was
no,
more
yeah,
just,
they're part
just
of that.
talking of the you know, the scene and the area and things like that. I've never been a giant Shadows Fall fan. Seen them a few times. Not a big fan of Brian Fair's voice.
Gotcha. Okay, so you could give a rip about their getting back together and now that Bittner's back in and all that, quitting Overkill.
I do think it's cool, and actually, you know, John Dene has been on the podcast a couple times, and he's another one of those dudes that like blows my mind when he like comments on shit. Like, that's the guy from Anthrax, you know, like in Shadows Fall, kind of talking about, you know, posting on my stuff. But yeah, it's cool for those guys. It's cool for John, you know, Jason Bittner, all those guys kind of getting back together and getting, you know, kind of what's due for those guys. There are a lot of those bands, you know, Chimera and all those bands kind of from the time that are coming back together and playing these massive festival shows and playing just big reunion shows and things like that. It's cool that the nostalgia is kind of coming back around for those guys too.
You had just participated you did some covers.
Yeah.
At a new metal celebration down in your area, correct?
Yep. Yeah, it's called Louisville Loves New Metal is what it's called.
You have anything on the horizon? Because it sounds like that kind of piqued your interest. Like you learned the 2 songs and then wanted to kind of not leave the stage.
Right.
You're having so much fun.
Yeah, I did 3 songs and it was kind of like by the 3rd song I'm like just warmed up, and yeah, I was I don't really want to get off stage now, but I think next time I'll end up doing something a little bit longer than that, but or you know, doing more songs for them. But I mean, that's just a yearly thing, so it's not an everyday thing. But yeah,
so that didn't plant some sort of seed for you that like you got to get back on stage and you got to get back into a band.
Yeah,
I mean, the podcast is big in your world right now, so that's obviously going to take time.
Right. The one thing, well, in 2022, that band 12 Volt Negative Earth got back together to do a kind of a benefit or a tribute to one of the clubs that we played with or played in the 90s. They did the kind of a 30th anniversary of them opening the show or opening the venue, but it closed down in 98, but it still kind of had like one of those fond memories kind of thing. You know, like everybody that was a kid in the 90s in Nashville got dropped off at this club, and you know, it held 200 people, but you know, over the years, you know, there was always the famous Green Day was supposed to play there, you know, shit like all those kind of stories over the years. But a lot of big bands did play there. A lot of bands that went on to be other bands, things like a lot of came through that club in the 4 years it was open. So we get together, we did 3 rehearsals, all 5 original members of the band, and play, you know, we got like a half-hour set and we just went out there and ripped it. But it was wild. It was like the old days, man. Just a ton of people in the crowd, people sing along, everyone's smile in their face. It was a fun to be a part of that. And then since then, you know, we always, it's a lot of talking about, well, let's record a new song. Let's record a new, EP. Let's do this. Let's do that. I have been sent a few ideas over the years that's over the last couple of years that sound really good, but it'll just take like somebody saying, "Hey, we are going to do this on this day," you know, and do it. So I think we'll eventually do something with that band. I always push for that band to do something. I actually always talk to, the singer of Primer 55 did pass away, in 2018, but the main guitar player who kind of, you know, still owns all the rights to all that stuff. I'm always blowing him up. I'm like, dude, let's do one more show. I was like, it is new metal revival time. Like Simon Says just got added to Aftershock. I'm like, dude, if Simon Says is getting added to Aftershock, Primer can headline a stage at Aftershock. You know, he's not really in it as deep as I am with like the kind of the current standings with everything. So I don't think he sees like as much as I do about, you know, I've interviewed a few artists that'll pop up and like, hey, before we get started, just want to say, big fan of Private 55 in high school, shit like that. Like they'll tell me that as we, I
Nice.
sang loose, me and my buddies, we used to jam loose and, all that shit. So I think that Primer could do something if we ever did, like, could jump on some festivals here and there, Sick New World or something like that. Like it's still, I think that Primer is still kind of in that like B or C tier of new metal that, play at 2:00 on a side stage at Sick New World kind of band. I don't think we'll come back as a massive force, but second out of 4 on a bill would be kind of cool.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. Before we get to our bonus song,
Yeah.
a couple things regarding the podcast. Do you have a favorite interview?
Ooh.
I know you've worked with a lot of people, and that might be a tough question, but I just was kind of curious if anything would just jump out at you at this moment. It's not something we would hold you to, in the years coming, because some other one might all of a sudden be, oh, I remember that. Yeah, I had a great time with that person. But that was one thing I was curious if, like, there was something that would just jump out of you immediately and be like, oh, this was, maybe not a favorite, but like one of the bright spots of your time doing podcasting.
I mean, I guess it kind of goes with the episode. I mean, the one that I always kind of go back to is the Jason Newsted episode. He did, obviously we did that over on the internet or whatever, on Skype or Zoom, whatever. I'm freaking out. I know I have an hour with Jason Newsted, and that was 6 or 7 years into podcasting. So it wasn't like I was that new at it, but it's still like the dude that got me into all this stuff. It's like, that's the whole thing. It's like, so when he pops up on the screen, I think if it on like the raw video, because I think I just hit record as soon as he popped up. I mean, you can just see it. Like, I'm like, hello, Mr. Newsted, But yeah, I think the Jason Newsted interview is probably one that I go back to the most. I don't really go back to episodes. I rarely kind of sit back and go, oh shit, like there's been a lot of dudes on this podcast, because I'm always thinking about the next episode. You're always thinking about the next one. You're always thinking about the next episode, the next interview, I got to book something. I got Louder Than Life coming up. I got to do this. I got to do that. So like one day I was kind of cleaning up my computer, deleting files and shit like that, just trying to just open up some space. And I just opened up like a folder of all these video interviews. I'm like, holy shit. Like, there's actually some times where I'm like, oh yeah, I did interview that guy. Or like, I'll be going through something and see an interview I did. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. Or I'll see the one I think is funny is when I see a quote from an episode that like Blabbermouth or something just picked up, but then I don't realize that it's from my show. I'll see it. I'm like, well, who got this interview? Who got that soundbite? And I open it up. I'm like, oh, it was me. That one, I guess, is probably the weirdest thing to happen. But yeah, it's been a crazy 9 years. It's definitely from starting it with absolutely no clue on how to do anything to where it is today. It's really crazy. Like just starting the podcast really with no idea how to do anything. Like I've said this many times. I bought like a $25 USB mic off Amazon that had terrible ground. It was like in those first few episodes, if they're even still up, I played music under my episode only to hide the hum of the ground noise from the microphone. And I would record interviews with a call recorder app on my phone. So if I did a interview with you, it was just on my phone. It was just a phone call. So I would like intro into this, phone call interview, and then into more of the crappy microphone. And then I think that lasted for a couple of months before I started learning about Skype. And there were, in the last 10 years, podcasting has come a long way in the last 10 years. Like, even in 2014, 15,
agreed.
I mean, that was still, everyone's still trying to figure it out too. Like it wasn't there was still, I remember the first time I was on Decibel Geek, it actually came up not too long ago, but I drove to Nashville, which is about 3-hour drive to Senzak or to Aaron Camaro's house. And I'm still like, I still assumed everybody had studios except for me. And I walk into Camaro's shed out back of his house and I sit down and they've got like a recorder with like an old mixer and like a couple of just SM or a couple of 58s for for microphones. And I was just like, oh, I drove all the way down here for this, but no, I was truly honored to go on their show. Man, that was one of the first times I was just like, kind of felt like I made it. I kind of felt like I was welcomed into the community.
Nice.
Was getting invited on Decibel Geek.
And those guys are pretty rock solid dudes as well.
Yeah, they're all right.
Just all right.
Camaro's pretty cool. You got to watch out for that Sinzak though.
Oh, really? See, I was wondering about the other way.
But yeah, I always say that the one thing that blows my mind about podcasting is all of the friends that I've made, you included, friends from all over the country and even the world, man. Like,
yes,
that not just listeners, but other podcasters and the community of podcasters. That's kind of cool. Like you guys do, you do something. I might say, hey man, what was that? What kind of mic are you using on that? Or, hey, what program are like there's so many people reaching out and asking for help and tips and things like that. It's I don't know. I always thought this would. It's funny. I always joke about this. I thought I would put this podcast out and my friends would enjoy it. And the more that I've done podcasting, my friends are cool with it and they think it's cool that I do it. But I don't think any of them listen. and it's like the listeners are like people I don't know, and it's weird that like random people will just reach out and be like, "Hey man, I've been listening to the podcast for 5 years," and I'm like, "I've never seen your name pop up on anything." It's weird how many listeners you probably have, or I have, or that have never reached out, will never reach out, but listen religiously. It's, you think that you talk to every listener that you have, but you realize that if you look at your numbers and the people that you actually talk to, that's not a one-to-one there.
Yeah, they're the silent fandom
majority.
Yeah, they hit that download every week or however often your episodes come out, but then not so much even interacting with you. They enjoy what you're putting out. And you got a Patreon too.
Yeah, I kind of started the Patreon up a couple of months, maybe 2 months ago. I kind of brought it back. I had done it a long time ago and never really messed with it, and it was almost just embarrassing. Have
gotcha.
like three patrons, and I never really promoted it or did anything with it. But now I'm actually like, Talk to Me Patreon, actually sending out stuff, extra or bonus content. Hey, what episode do you guys want to hear this week? This one or that one? I did have, I've had a few interviews lately where patrons can come on and watch along as we're doing the interview. And then, at the end, if they want to ask a question.
Yes, you did that with Zach, didn't you?
Yeah, I did that with Zach Wild and Jason Hook from formerly Five Finger Death Punch. And I've done it with like the last 5 or so episodes, but yeah, the Zach Wild one was kind of the main teaser. And actually, I think the question that the listener asked was kind of the one that got picked up by Blabbermouth, which is kind of funny. Like, I was like, I'll take that credit. That was another one where when we were getting off the call, for some reason, I said, thank you, sir, to Zach Wild. Like he was like some kind of, like respecting my elders or something. Like, thank you, sir. But it just kind of came out, and I was like, I don't know why. I almost called him Mr. Wild or something.
It was a sign of respect.
Yeah, it was definitely respect. And the whole thing was cool. But yeah, he was really cool. It's kind of funny because I thought I love his internet presence. Like he's funny. He always posts funny videos. He was great on like Vine type stuff, things like that. Like just these really quick videos that I like his sense of humor a lot. So I kind of thought he and I would, we're just going to yuck it up like a couple of buds. And then about 15 minutes in, I realized I kind of went through all my bullet points because I don't write out questions. I do write down little bullet points for everything. And I kind of had to start racking my brain for more Zach Wild shit to talk about. Because I thought we would talk more about Pantera and we would talk more about this. And listening back to the interview, it's a fun interview. Don't get me wrong. It's 30 minutes. I think it's a really good interview, but it's just funny that I'm like, oh shit, we're not like just hamming it up like I thought we were going to. So I'm like the only interviewer probably like, hey, remember that time you were on Aqua Teen Hunger Force? That was awesome. Yeah.
Well, the interview from my point of view sounded pretty solid. I know you're hearing it differently because you had a different premonition on how you wanted things to go. I can appreciate that because I've been there myself. I think probably any podcaster going into something has got an idea and, we're going to go down this path. And sometimes, you're not getting that bounce back, you're playing, handball on a curtain, so to speak, or sometimes it's they're running the show and then you're just kind of along the ride, just hoping to guide the conversation to certain directions when you get those moments, so, but as long as it's fun and it comes out and it's good, that's the crux of it. You just kind of have to let go of your premonitions or your preconceived notions on how you want it to go. Cause it sounded great on my end when I was listening to it. It was a lot of fun. Zach's always, it seems to be a good hang.
Oh yeah. That's what I'm saying. I think it was, that's why I kind of assumed we would just yuck it up and kind of bounce off of each other. But it was more him bouncing off of questions that I had for him. I mean, there's tons of those though, like where I'll get off, you hit the end call or whatever on the thing and you're like, man, that was awful. And then you go back to the edit and you're like, actually, this is actually pretty good. It's just funny. Yep. Like you're in the moment. So how I got hooked up with NotFest is when during the pandemic, everything shut down, notfest.com, they want to turn into not only about the festival, but they want to turn it into kind of a news site, and they want to start a NotFest Twitch stream because that was the rage at the time, was the old Twitch stream. So they basically wanted to do a MTV style Twitch stream that was daily from 4 to midnight with everybody having like these 2-hour block shows. There were some daily shows. There was a countdown show. There was a news segment every week, but there was also some specialty shows. And so this goes back to the podcast community, which the guy, Bees, he used to have a podcast called That's Not Metal. He was in England, and it was one of those things where I just listened to his podcast all the time. And one day I reached out and said, hey man, like what you're doing. This is what this is my show. I don't think he's ever been on. But he got hooked up with NotFest kind of first and was kind of taking the reins of this NotFest Twitch. And so he needed content creators. And I just put out that Terry Date interview I did for Drag the Waters, my Pantera podcast.
Oh, yes.
That Terry Date episode kind of people that knew like Pantera and Terry Date, like that was a big deal because we talked about every record that, every Pantera record that Terry Date did, plus the remix and remaster that he did for Reinventing the Steel. We talked about all that stuff. So that was kind of like fresh on everybody's minds. Like, holy shit, because I found Terry Date's email on like the weirdest website ever. Like it was, and Terry Date's email address was like td13@hotmail.com. Like it was not it was one of those like, I'm going to send an email to this, and if I get anything back, I do, and if I don't, I don't. And I got back, and he was like, hey, man, I'm about to do this record, but, I can do this, I can do this in December. He's like, hit me back up then. I was like, all right. So, and I had to wait a couple months to get him back, but I got him on, and I was like, hey, man, just need an hour, and we did our hour, and I put it out. Bees was all about it, and then he was like, hey, man, I'm working on something. I can't really talk about it yet, but I want you involved, and push comes to shove, time goes on, and then he finally like breaks it out. He's like, hey man, I want you to do the show 2 hours on Thursdays, kind of it was called Throwback Throwdown. And we just talked about nostalgia type stuff. And so I would talk about, which is live streaming. I'd never done that before. Most intimidating thing I've ever done in my life. It's being live on the internet. It's no fun. But it got to be more guest oriented. So I would bring in a guest for the second hour, I'd bring a guest on. The first episode I ever did was Heidi from Butcher Babies. And she had been on a couple times before, and she's she used to be in radio. So she's kind of got the thing down. She knows how to run an interview if you need her to kind of step up or whatever. And so she jumped on, we did like the whole second hour. And I remember like there's some technical issues, and I just remember getting off of that stream, like hitting the end stream and standing up. I was like right here, and I stood up, and I'm like, that was the worst thing I've ever done in my life. And then I immediately look at my phone, and everyone from NotFest is like, that was the best thing you've ever done in your entire life. And they were like, we all loved it. Because the whole time I was pushing, I really just wanted my podcast like on somehow through NotFest. And so I kept bringing up the podcast, and they're like, yeah. Let's just get this Twitch stream, going. So I did the first couple of episodes of the Twitch stream, and then they finally offered me some money for the podcast, and I came over, and honestly, like I remember the number I had in my head. I was like, if they can pay me this per episode, I'll be happy. And I was driving, and I get an email and it's like podcast proposal or something like that. And I opened it up and like I literally pulled over and like started to cry because like I was like, holy fucking shit.
Nice.
So obviously that worked out. And then, but I guess what I was saying was I thought was the worst thing I've ever done was that first Heidi from Butcher Babies on MLiFS Twitch. And then they're like seeing it from a whole different perspective. Like, that was awesome. There's just so many times I feel like interviews have been awful. And then like you get off the thing and you're like, that was actually pretty cool. I'm sure you've had that with either your show or even like when you play a live show. They're like, that show sucked. And then you get off stage. And then like people that know the band are like, that was the best show I've ever seen of you guys. You're like, all right, well, whatever.
I tried to not be that person to try to talk them out of their experience. Because that was always my instinct coming off a stage is just go, I missed this vocal line, or I missed this guitar part, or the drummer dropped a stick right at the wrong point because we were building up to something, and then all of a sudden Zeus drops the stick, and this sucked. And after a while, I'm like, why am I doing that? Why am I convincing them that what they just saw was worse than what they just saw? So I eventually stopped doing that shit. So I can relate. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, you definitely have to, especially live. You're like, it was funny that one of the guys that we played with in the Louisville Loves New Metal was a guy that he was like the brother-in-law of like the guy that was kind of the main dude of our band. Like they were in the Louisville Loves New Metal, there were 3 different bands, and like there was kind of a leader between all these dudes that kind of got everybody together. But that one of the guitar players was his brother-in-law. But I walked in there and I didn't know that like the guy had never played on stage before. But I mean, like he's probably in his 30s. Great. He was like crushing the guitar, like every song crushing, had all the effects and everything. Like it was awesome. And then I found out that he'd never been on stage before. And so he was worried about like missing notes and stuff. I was like, dude, ain't nobody going to give a shit about you missing some notes. So yeah, we got up there and, I mean, he killed it live too. I was like, how is this guy not in a band? Like, how have you never been in a band? He's like, he kept calling himself a basement musician. I was like, all right, dude. It was cool though. Yeah,
I worked with a drummer one single time that was like that, where we were putting together a blues project actually, and he hadn't heard Hard to Handle. And so you're not talking like a difficult song. Never heard it before, not even the original. So we put on Black Crowes Hard to Handle because the other guitar player thought that'd be a good bar song. Played it once, and he fucking nailed it. Just hearing the one time over the PA, we sat down and we played it. And I was like, oh my God, this is manna from heaven. A drummer that's got all of his teeth, got a job, transportation, the whole ball of wax. But dude he's like, oh, I thought we were going to jam every once in a while. I can't start a band. I got a kid and I run a business. And I was so heartbroken.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, there are people out there like that, just dip their toe in every once in a while, but they don't need the spotlight, or they don't need to get out there and try to run that obstacle course of freaking getting on shows and trying to keep a band together and replacing members and all that battle that you go through.
Yeah, that's definitely that's one thing I always think about. Like starting a band at this age. I'm like, no, I'm not doing it. I'll play with, I'll mine the old bands for some stuff or get up and play some covers and things like that. But yeah, I couldn't imagine trying to like start a band at 45.
No, maybe give it 15 years. Then maybe you'll be back for more.
But yeah, at 60, that's when I'm going to start my next band. But I will say, I mean, as we kind of wrap up here.
Yes.
The one thing I've talked about with the member of the band that I'm gonna bring up here, but one thing that it's been fun for me to watch is bands' careers that, they come on the podcast early, maybe the first album, and then watching them gain success, gain fans and gain, higher slots on bills and headlining this and just all that stuff, to me has been my favorite part of the podcast. I thought it was going to be, the Jason Newsted interview, David Ellefson, like all my heroes from as a kid, when they pop up on the screen or I see them in person or whatever. Like I always think I always thought that would probably be the coolest thing for me. But really, man, I think it's watching some of these younger bands get it, just kind of getting their foot in the door. And the next thing you know, they're, number one album on this chart or that chart. And like a guy like, Cody from Wage War, every time you turn around now, obviously his band is doing well, but he writes for Jelly Roll and he writes for Falling in Reverse. And, if there's a certain, he writes like the cool breakdowns in the Falling in Reverse songs and shit like that. Like he's he's doing what he came on the podcast 5 years ago and said he wanted to do. You know, he's doing it now. So yeah, I think it's cool. Kind of the younger bands that are, you know, getting, you know, like I said, man, just kind of getting bigger and bigger. And one of my favorite bands I got, because that was the thing with the NotFest Twitch stream, was I was doing a weekly podcast and I was getting 1 or 2 guests a week on the NotFest Twitch stream. So I was doing like 3 interviews a week, if not more. So I needed guests. So I was like basically hitting up every publicist I know. And I'm like, hey, who do you have? Who do you have for NotFest? Who do you have for this? And I got pitched Memphis May Fire, and I wasn't a fan, wasn't really too, I mean, they had a few records out at the time. I wasn't too well versed in the band, and I was like, yeah, I'll take him on. That would be great. I'll have Matty on. And he came on. He was great. I got more and more into the band. He came on again came on Actual Talk to Me for something. You know, their album was kind of coming out. They do that thing where they release a single and wait a month or two, single, wait a month or two. I think they had like 9 singles out before the album actually came out over like almost a year period. But he's become one of my favorite bands, and he's become one of my favorite people. Like when I went down to, he actually lives in Nashville now. He invited me to his house. We did an interview at his house, and then Cody from Wage War came over. You know, I did the interview with Cody. You know, Matty's just that dude now. But yeah, my bonus track is going to be Misery by Memphis May Fire off of Remade in Misery.
That's a band I'm not familiar with other than the name, so I'm looking forward to checking this one out. Josh, thanks. Joshua, thank you for all the time. I appreciate it. We went longer than we anticipated, but that's why I keep it kind of open-ended, because sometimes you get down memory lane or you talk about stuff going on and it's just too much fun. You don't want to shut it down all the time. So I appreciate you taking the time and hooking up with me and hanging out and suffering through our difficulties with the technology to get us kicked off. But we got it. We're all set. We're good. And we'll put this together and share it with people, and we're going to have some fun. Listen to some great tunes. So thanks again for coming.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. This has been a blast.
Some violence, try to speak, but it's saying to be silent. I grab the bottle, hoping I can make it quiet, but they get louder every time I try to hide it. Nothing left to lose at rock bottom. Wounds turn to scars, yeah, I got 'em. But I've come to learn, you gotta let it burn if you're gonna be fortunate. No fire. I try to take the pain away, and nothing seems to change. But when I go through hell, it's when I know myself. And all the lies that
We had a punk rock band. We had called it Crack Baby.
Thank you for listening to Disciples of the Watch. This episode was produced and edited by Gene Vogel. All music is property of the artist or the publisher. Please buy music and support the art we all love. Editing on this episode was done by Gene Vogel. Check out our website, dotwpod.com, for show notes, links, and more information on the show, as well as connections to social media. Don't forget to subscribe to the show using your preferred podcast application, or use our FeedBurner RSS feed listed on our website. Plug it into your browser or whatever app you're using, and then you will get all of the goodness moving forward. And you can also download the show as MP3 files from dotwpod.com. If you'd like to support the show, please click on the support us link at our website. As well, we have Patreon, so you can do a monthly contribution if you so desire, or purchase some of our merch from our website. Thank you for listening, friends, and stay heavy.